In the world of outlaw bikers, strength meant everything, but being a giant among the brothers is always welcomed. Arman Edward Bletcher was one of those men. He was 6 feet 8 inches tall, weighed 350 pounds, and was so strong that he didn't need bats or guns. For his enemies, his fists were enough. But Arman wasn't known only for his size. He worked as an enforcer, a bodyguard for famous people, a nightclub bouncer, and later became a feared member of the Hells Angels. However, it was not his rivals who brought him down. It was the betrayal by his own family. Early life and transformation. Arman Bletcher was born on November 14, 1942, in Alameda County, California, to Edward Bletcher and Beverly Manoogian. He had 2 siblings named Sharon and Charlene. His father, Edward E. Bletcher, was a decorated Navy veteran who served in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. His father's military career inspired Arman's childhood, taught him resilience and discipline from an early age. Arman's life did not start like this. As a boy, Arman was smaller than his peers. He was bullied at school. That changed soon, and in no time, he was taller than all of them. But he was still skinny, so to fix his muscles, he threw himself into weightlifting, spending countless hours in the gym. And he didn't stop at weightlifting. He began using horse steroids to maintain his size, pushing his body far beyond natural limits. This shocking transformation transformed him into a giant, with a body that resembled a weapon. Combined with the discipline his father had taught him, Arman was like a one-man army. Arman's phone never stopped ringing. Bar owners called when they needed a walking wall to keep their clubs under control. Promoters called when they needed their events to stay clean. And people with serious problems, the kind they didn't want police or newspapers to hear about, called when they needed those problems removed quietly. The title kept changing. At first, he was just a bouncer. Then, a bodyguard. Soon, an enforcer. The paychecks got bigger, and so did the risks. In Fresno and San Jose, Arman worked the doors of some of the roughest nightclubs around. His presence alone was enough to stop fights before they started. Imagine stepping into a bar and seeing a man nearly 7 feet tall and 350 pounds standing at the door. Most people thought twice before even raising their voices. But when fights broke out, Arman thrived. He preferred fists over weapons, no knives, no bats, no guns. Just raw power. He was known for loving a fight and never losing one. His size and strength opened unexpected doors. At one point, Arman even worked as part of the protection detail for none other than Frank Sinatra. If the mob wanted someone kept safe, if a promoter needed muscle, or if a club wished to order, Arman was the man they called. This was also when people began calling him Big Armen, not just because of his size, but because no one could move him. He was a wall of flesh and muscle. Working with Hell's Angels, Arman's reputation grew so fast that it spilled into outlaw circles. He built ties with mafia figures and soon found himself working alongside the Hell's Angels. In Fresno, he became a trusted ally of the local charter. The Fresno chapter itself had been founded in 1968. Making it one of the earliest Hells Angels groups in California outside the Bay Area. By the 1970s, it had developed a reputation as one of the most violent charters, deeply tied to the city's growing problems with drugs, bar fights, and organized rackets. Leadership shifted through the decade, but Fresno always operated in the shadow of Oakland, the seat of Sonny Barger, the legendary president who acted as the national face of the Hells Angels. Barger's word carried weight in every California charter, Fresno included. And when someone like Arman proved himself as muscle, his reputation quickly traveled beyond the Central Valley. Even Sonny himself acknowledged Arman's presence, famously saying that if he had to choose between taking 10 angels into a fight or just Arman, he'd pick Arman every time. That kind of praise from the most powerful Hells Angel in America only cemented Arman's myth. Even Easy Riders magazine noticed. They featured him as Big Armen Bletcher, arbitrator and bill collector, presenting him as both a symbol of biker culture and a larger-than-life figure. But in the world of outlaw bikers, reputation alone was never enough. It didn't matter how many people feared you or how many stories surrounded your name. Respect inside the club was earned only through blood and violence. To climb higher, you had to prove yourself again and again, not just against rivals, but in front of your brothers. For Arman, that wasn't a problem. He didn't shy away from violence. He embraced it. He collected debts, crushed rivals, and acted as muscle for the Angels' operations in Fresno. Unlike most enforcers who leaned on weapons, Arman's fists were his weapons. And those fists carried a reputation of their own. Every fight he walked away from without a scratch made him more valuable. Arman didn't simply defeat opponents, he broke them, body and spirit. At one incident, a rival swung a baseball bat at Arman again and again, striking his ribs, arms, and even his skull. Any other man would have dropped. But Arman kept moving forward, step by step, like the blows meant nothing. Ultimately, the bat cracked against him with full force, but his face never changed. No flinch, no pain, just a cold focus. And when he finally struck back, it was over with one punch. That single hit felt like a wrecking ball, dropping his opponent instantly. Inside the Hells Angels, that kind of dominance made him indispensable. He was the man they sent when they needed problems ended fast. But this path also meant there was no turning back. He wasn't a man who could choose a quiet life anymore. He had become a solution for people who lived with loud problems. That's how legends start. And more often than not, that's also how they end. Arman didn't chase trophies like competitive bodybuilders. Strength for him wasn't about numbers on a scoreboard, it was about function. He could load motorcycles into a pickup with his bare hands, flip a man across a bar with one arm, or bench press more than 700 pounds when he needed to. This kind of working-class strength carried more weight in outlaw circles than medals ever could. But brute intimidation only went so far. By the 1970s, Fresno had become a hotspot for biker violence, drug turf wars, and mafia-backed rackets. If Arman wanted to hold his place in that economy, fists alone had to turn into control, and control meant violence. Unlike many enforcers of the era who leaned on knives or pistols, Arman relied almost entirely on his fists. He preferred the certainty of a direct punch, fast, personal, and final. Those who fought him said he never lost, and most never wanted to try twice. This love for fighting made him perfect for the doors of Fresno and San Jose nightclubs, where bikers, mobsters, and hustlers collided nightly. One night at a local club, a fight broke out, and this one escalated fast. Arman was in the middle of it. Soon, the crack of gunfire split the room. The chaos erupted instantly. Patrons ducked under tables. When the smoke cleared, one man was bleeding, and Arman was accused of being the one who pulled the trigger. For most men, a charge like that would have meant the end and prison time, a reputation ruined. But when the case went to court, something else happened. Testimony painted the fight as self-defense. The victim had come to Arman first, and the jury believed it. In the end, he walked free. That ruling did more than keep him out of prison. It fed the legend. To the public, it looked like Arman could shoot a man in a crowded bar and still walk out untouchable. For his enemies, it sent a darker message. Not only was he willing to use his fists, he wasn't afraid to pull a gun if he had to. And for the Hells Angels, it confirmed he was more than just muscle at the door. He was the kind of enforcer who could stare down cops, courts, and still come out the other side with his reputation intact. The Fresno Bee reported allegations that Arman was a paid enforcer for mafia-linked drug gangs, suggesting that his muscle was hired not only by the Hells Angels, but also by high-level dealers who needed debts collected and rivals intimidated. Though charges never stuck, the whispers were enough to cement his image as a man operating on both sides of the law, biker and mafia, outlaw and businessman. These nightclubs weren't just places of music and drinking. They were battlegrounds where deals collapsed, rivalries flared, and grudges played out in broken glass and blood. Yet when Big Armen stood at the entrance, most of that trouble died instantly. One look at his towering frame was usually enough, and when it wasn't, Armen was more than ready. Sonny Barger mentioned in his book that Armen loved bouncing because it meant one thing: constant fights. And fighting was where he felt alive. Trouble with the law. Violence carries a price. Arman's enemies were not only rivals in leather. Detectives kept a close eye on his haunts, and the FBI opened files. By the mid-1970s, Fresno sat on a live wire. Drug crews fought over corners and supplies. Nightclubs doubled as cash fronts. Bar fights turned into gun cases. Local coverage tied outlaw bikers to intimidation jobs and late-night collections. And Arman's name kept surfacing in that mix as the man people called when fear was the product. The FBI pushed racketeering angles. Agents believed Arman was more than a barroom brawler. They suspected paid enforcement for drug groups and debt work for connected dealers. Warrants were drafted. Surveillance ran outside bars and shops. Then the cases stalled. Witnesses went quiet. To understand the pressure around him, look at what Fresno authorities later had to confront as those same networks hardened. Inside that climate, Arman was not a background extra. He was the name people whispered when threats needed teeth. He was also a problem the FBI could not close. The files stayed hot, the charges did not. The downfall. By the mid-1970s, Arman Bletcher's name kept surfacing in connection with drug trafficking, extortion, and violent enforcement jobs. Local police could only do so much. Witnesses were too terrified to talk, but the FBI was circling. They wanted to indict him on racketeering, the same charge that had brought down mobsters. Arman knew investigators didn't have computer databases in those days. If he could show a steady paycheck, something that looked legitimate on paper, the feds might close his file. So he came up with a plan. He turned to his cousins, the Pasayan brothers, who ran a family-owned tire shop in Fresno. He asked them to put him on their payroll so it would look like he had a steady, lawful income. But the brothers wanted nothing to do with his outlaw world. They refused. That refusal cut deep. To a man like Arman, rejection wasn't just personal, it was dangerous. He pressed harder, calling them over and over, accusing them of snitching to the FBI, demanding they cooperate with his scheme. Each call raised the tension higher. On November 25, 1975, it all exploded. Arman stormed into the shop, no longer asking but demanding. Accounts differ, but the facts that came out in court were brutal. The Pasayan brothers said he threatened to kill them. They claimed they had no choice. One grabbed a baseball bat and swung hard. The blows landed, but the giant kept advancing. Even battered, he didn't go down. Panicked, the brothers pulled out a 9mm pistol. 2 warning shots cracked into the concrete at Arman's feet. Still, he moved forward. That was the moment Josh Pasayan fired 3 rounds into his back. The giant finally fell. For a man who had terrified bars, rivals, and entire neighborhoods, his end came in the most unexpected place, a small Fresno tire shop, at the hands of his own family. Arman Bletcher, the man Sonny Barger once called the single most valuable fighter in the Angels, was just 33 years old. Legacy. Arman Bletcher's story didn't end with his death in 1975. It turned into outlaw legend. Within the biker world, he was remembered as one of the largest and most intimidating enforcers to ever wear the Hells Angels patch. His reputation wasn't just about size, it was about presence. Often, fights ended before they even began simply because Big Armen had walked into the room. Even Sonny Barger, the legendary Hells Angels president, acknowledged Bletcher's power. In his memoir, Barger said if he had to choose between taking 10 angels into a fight or just Armen, he'd pick Armen. That one statement shows how much raw strength and fear Armen carried with him. But his legacy cuts both ways. To his brothers in the club, he was a loyal enforcer who lived and bled for the Angels. To his enemies, he was a nightmare, a man who seemed unstoppable, shrugging off fists, bats, even bullets, until the day his own bloodline turned against him. His violent death at the hands of his cousins closed one of the most brutal chapters in California biker history. Yet, instead of being forgotten, his name was retold as outlaw folklore. Among bikers, he remains a cautionary tale, a symbol of brute strength, unshakable loyalty, and the inevitable downfall that shadows a life built on violence. In the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, Arman Bletcher is remembered as both a menace and a myth. His story lives as legend, but legends aren't unique to America's biker scene. In another part of the world, a different brotherhood rose to power, blending motorcycles, politics, and loyalty to the state itself. Click on the next video to see their story that shows how a club can transform into something much bigger and far more dangerous.